What's up, sons? It's Blind Rod with Son of a Tech once again, and today I have joining me Mr. Daniel Keller once again from Flux, and we're going to just be talking proof of work today. They recently had, or he coordinated a proof of work kind of roundtable. I definitely highly recommend checking that out. I'll leave a link down to it, but brought together a bunch of proof of work coins and developers and founders, etc., of all of these different projects. Each one of them have their different roles for their project. So, go check the video out. I'll leave a link down to it in the description. But thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, buddy, as always.
So a lot has been changing, obviously. I think since the last time you were on, I was trying to figure out the last time I had you on, but I don't recall exactly, so I might have to dig back through it. Might have been closer back to like September or something like that during probably the Ethereum merge issues.
Yes,
And then
I think that was
post
it.
that and all of that, we had a lot of different people on at the time kind of talking about what was going to happen post it. Oddly enough looks like we pretty much called it out. I would say that Flux did a fantastic job at handling the hash rate from a network perspective off the merge. There wasn't any huge issues with network stability or anything, which we did see on other coins, right? So good work. Bravo there. Your team seemed to do a good job.
Thank you to the team. I'm just their cheerleader.
Yeah.
They're the ones that move the wrenches and make it happen, man.
There you go. Yeah, because that was a tumultuous time. There was a lot going on, a lot of hash rate trying to find a place, and then ultimately, obviously, a lot turned off. And a lot was turned off until maybe like a couple months ago, and we started seeing hash rate that wasn't there coming back online. And we've had a resurgence in proof of work, not only on some of the older proof of work coins that have been around for a couple cycles, but now we have some new proof of work coins popping up for this cycle, right? So sounds like, or it looked like, with your kind of latest roundtable with everyone, you had a few of the newer projects on, including, I think, Meow Coin, as well as, did you have Radiant, Nexa, or did Radiant show up? Yeah. Radiant was there.
Yeah, and we also had Caspa as well.
Caspa, which is a new one too. So Caspa kind of started at the end of the last bull run, I guess. It was like, I want to say the first block I mined for Caspa was in March of last year of 2022, but I think they were around since December of 2021 or something. Maybe even
earlier. That sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds right. So I would say they're not necessarily a new kid, but they're one of the, I think the one that, is they're definitely surging and people are definitely interested in the project. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's, the pedigree of the developer, Jonathan, and the amount of research papers and such that he's been referenced in across the, for the history of blockchain, right? Going all the way back to 2013. Right. That's obviously going to raise some eyebrows of like, why is he doing this work over here instead of, on Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever it may be, right? So it's kind of interesting. I'm definitely excited to see where they go. I had a question for you though. You had that roundtable. What was the big takeaway there that you got from it?
Well, I think the big takeaway was the fact that let's start out with this. The goal of the roundtable was to bring all these proof of work projects together, and because I had been seeing a lot of tribalistic kind of banter on Twitter and other spaces where people were kind of fudding on other projects and things like that. And my goal was to bring them all together and say, look, we can all commit to working together and basically advancing proof of work overall, because when we succeed as a group, we all, rising tide lifts all boats, so to speak. So,
right.
I think the big thing that I took away from it is we're a lot alike, every single one of us. We all have, dreams and aspirations of being, a high-end technology iterative process. We're looking to do something greater than ourselves. And I would say that there was not one soul on that call that was all about the money, which is nice to hear, because that's the majority of what you see in crypto right now.
Yeah.
Is the, number go up, win moon, the moon boys, right? So, I really think hearing them convey what they're working on their projects and how they're really addressing pushing proof of work to the next level, the next iteration of what proof of work will look like. You mentioned earlier about proof of work having a resurgence. Uh, what's old is new again, right? So now all of a sudden, proof of work is looking pretty damn good, right? We're talking
Yeah, and
about
how
Go
much
ahead.
of that do you think is coming from the new talks around regulation, right? Even most recently, I was shocked to read the quotes from Hillary Clinton basically saying that the threat is of miners, right? Generating new currency. That in particular destabilizes, reserve currencies and currencies of the world and governments. Not that your proof of stake Ethereum does. And then we saw this weird kind of with Gary Gensler trying to tiptoe around whether or not Ethereum is a security. And it kind of, I got a little bit of a tinfoil hat on there, and I'm like, is that because they realize they have that control over Ethereum where they don't with the proof of work?
Yeah, I think you're right on the money. I think it has a lot to do with the regulatory ambiguity. That I watched the entire Gary Gensler interview and I was very unimpressed. I mean, the guy couldn't even describe whether or not Ethereum was a security or not, and they're continuing to sell Wells notices to these projects. They have no clue what they're doing. They sent a Wells notice to Bittrex and they listed Dash. I mean, like, come on, man. Like, they're really just grabbing at straws at this point. And
Right.
I think it's by design. And I do agree with what you said about Hillary Clinton. I would say the normies don't understand the difference between proof of work, proof of stake, or proof of whatever the hell it is. I think that they look at the control factor and
Right.
they know that they can control Ethereum because it's completely centralized. Uh, the miners are the wild card, and honestly, this is why I love proof of work because
And that's because that's because of
yeah,
the inputs and the outputs, right? The input
yes,
is a piece of computer hardware that they can't take away from anyone at the end of the day, right? Like they can't basically stop the inlet, right? If your inlet is a GPU into the market, that's a lot harder to stop than the inlet being the actual currency. Whereas with proof of stake, your inlet is always a fiat currency, right? And
yep.
that's the key.
Yeah, I think it even gets deeper than that, man. Like I think what some of these projects are doing with, I mean, I'm going to use Flux as the example because I know it the best, but the fact that controlling the currency model is one thing, but where they have more success and more control is controlling the data models.
Mm-hmm.
And data equals power. And I think that they're finally starting to realize that these things are going to get out of hand. They can't go to Google and slap them with a subpoena and say shut so and so down or do this or do that. So I do think that there is some some fear in these leaders who realize that their power that they've held on for so long is starting to be given back to the people. And I think we continue to keep driving that with proof of work. Because you cannot shut down those input output models, right? It is 100% decentralized. And when you're decentralized, they know Gary, when he was stammering through trying to explain, whether or not things were securities, deep inside, the man taught at MIT Bitcoin classes, and then he claims he doesn't own any Bitcoin. Bullshit.
Yeah.
I guarantee he owns Bitcoin, and I guarantee he knows owns Ethereum. So in the end, he understands that it can't be controlled, and that's what's awesome for us is eventually once we start getting some regulatory clarity, I think proof of work comes out the winner in the end.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting too, because even if you don't have clarity, if it went, let's just say it goes complete attack on all cryptocurrency, which I think would be stupid at this point. I think they know that wouldn't play out, but you never know because people do repeat past mistakes. But I would just point to Pirate Bay. Have you ever seen a successful shutdown of peer-to-peer networks at all? Right? like at the end of the day, torrents still exist to this day. You're still able to go out and get whatever you want on peer-to-peer networks. And no matter how hard they try and how many letters the ISPs send out threatening to shut off your internet connection, they're still not able to regulate that, right? And that really flows straight over into, proof of work. So even if it became a legal issue, it's like, okay, woohoo, glad you made that a legal issue that nobody's allowed to do, but you're not going to arrest everybody that's participating on the network. And then to follow that up, if they decide to actually attack it, I would reference like software and the fact that it's too expensive at this point to attack the Bitcoin network. It just wouldn't be fiscally possible at this point, right?
Yeah, and I think we look at history as where we started. We look at, LimeWire and Lars Ulrich from Metallica when they went after that, and they went after the ISPs and everything else. Were they able to shut LimeWire down? Yeah, they were, but all it did was create, or Napster or some of these other products, all it did was force it deeper underground and make it more to the point where they couldn't control it. But the one thing that they did do, and they realized that they had to monetize it. And that LimeWire Napster scenario gave birth to the Spotify's, gave birth to the Amazon Music. So they understood that if they could, they're not going to completely stop this over here, but if I give a better product to my end users, they're going to gravitate to it and they're going to pay for it anyway. And I see the same thing happening with cryptocurrencies. If they try to go after them, all it's going to do is solidify the project even more. It's going to make it even, they use this laissez-faire attitude where they're like, well, it's fake internet money anyway. Okay. If you try to build your business model or your technology model around crypto instead of trying to defeat it, eventually this will be a better product for you in the long run. Mm-hmm. So I think that's eventually what's going to happen. I really do.
I mean, we already see CBDCs coming down the line, right? We got Fed now coming out in July now. That most definitely will turn into a CBDC by all accounts at this point, right? It's already pretty much in testnet in China, seems to be doing pretty well. And in the UK, they've stated that they're going to copy China's model as well as far as that's surrounded. Part of the convenience there, though, will be, I think, a sort of dependence on the government that maybe doesn't fly in some place like the United States, right? And that'll be kind of interesting to see how that plays out, I think.
Well, I think the big thing you have to look at in the United States that doesn't play out in China. China's a communist country. It's easy to control the people because that's all they ever have known. In the United States, the experiment with freedom has led us to be a really cash-based society. Like, if I have $100 in my pocket, I'm not telling you what I'm doing with it. You know what I mean? And I don't have to do that. But if you start taking that away from people and start pushing them into a box, it isn't going to work in the end.
Well, and they've kind of done that, right? With now you got to report $600 on PayPal and Cash App. Well, what if I'm all year just paying for half a lunch, and splitting that with my coworker? Now I can't use Cash App or PayPal because I'm going to pay taxes on that now at the end of the year? That's ridiculous. Yep. And you'll rack up $600 real quick if you're doing that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what they're looking more for going after is the shadow economy, the shadow system, and that is, I go to this Chinese restaurant close to the house, and I order my Chinese food, and when I get there, she says, if you pay in cash, it's going to cost you $30. If you pay in credit card, it's going to cost you $39. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, well, I got cash. I'll pay you in cash. Yeah. And I get my Chinese. And the reason she's doing that, the reason they're doing it is that is perpetuated across the entire United States demographic, right? There's people that are earning money in the States. They're sending it to Mexico. They're sending it to other places. So I think what they're really trying to do is go after the shadow economies, the waitresses that are getting their tips via cash, which, by the way, if you're a waitress, anyone that's tipping you can tell you that it's a gift and you can gift that money and you don't have to pay that in taxes. So make sure you look into that. But that's the thing that they're looking for. They're going to go after the pools. My son was they called it an essay, which basically was, glorified busboy. And they had a pool that they accumulated in tips, and at the end of every night they would pay everybody out of that pool of tips, and you get your tips. They want to track who's getting that money out of that pool.
Right.
They want to track, those are the things where CBDCs say, I'm buying a gun, and they don't like, well, hey, you bought 2 guns this year. Why do you need 3? Well, I need 3 because I didn't want 3.
Yeah, it's not your business.
I want more than 3, So in the end, I think the experiment in America isn't going to bode well for the government if they try to implement a CBDC, because the control pieces are just not there. I would be shocked to see it be embraced. And I think even, politics aside, the Democrats need to be wise, because if they wield too much power while they're in office, the pendulum ultimately swings the other way, and it'll be coming back after them. So, I think they're shooting themselves in the foot right now. But there are Democrats out there that do support cryptocurrencies. I mean,
and vice versa. There's some, even in the state of Texas here, we have this kind of anti-crypto mining group that's all Republicans that are going out trying to stop the benefit of Bitcoin miners that are curtailing and remove their possibility to receive, basically a kickback. And I was explaining that on my last show, because what people don't realize is the curtailment actually ends up benefiting the customer, because it reduces the cost of the energy. Because anytime you're over, like, let's say you're a power company and you're buying from the market, and then you distribute that to your customers, you deliver that to your customers. If you're short on energy, you have to go to the spot market that day. More than likely, everybody else is short that day too, which means your cost for energy that day for all of your customers just skyrocketed. If you're able to curtail during that part, you take that and you're selling it on the spot market at a premium, and then that reduces the bill for all of your customers. But they want to get rid of that, and then they want to just say, if we want to turn down, we're going to force all the miners to turn down. Well, how do you target an individual industry like that, right? Like, it's not, in my mind, like, you look at that, and that's discrimination across the board.
Well, yeah, they're going to go back after data centers, or they're going to go back after the financial institutions that have massive data and, power draws on the grid. I mean, hell, the town that I live in alone has 35 banks in it. You know what I mean? Like, what's the footprint on that,
Yeah.
So,
well, and then what do you do with everybody charging their cars, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're basically, if you're charging a Tesla, you are taking that household energy cost up, not just by like 100%, but in upwards of like 200% to 300%, right? Depending on like how much you drive and commute. In the state of Texas, it can easily be 300%. And then you're basically, at that point, you're maxing out your panel too, right? And so are you going to charge more there? It doesn't make sense to target individual industry unless there's some sort of ulterior motive to it, right? Behind it, which I would probably guess there is, right?
I would 100% agree that there is. And I think those things are going to be slowly fleshed out over the next year or so. Going back to what you said about Fed Now, I 100% believe that this is the way that they usher in a CBDC. And but the thing that's happening, and I don't know if you've noticed this or not, we're starting to become more educated as consumers and as users of cryptocurrency. So we're starting to see things for face value. And my generation is the last generation that will be old school monetary system, right? There's a reason why millennials are drawn toward Bitcoin. And they're not going to, it's the sense of freedom. It's the fact that they got screwed over by my generation.
There's no money left, right?
Yeah, there's no money left, right? What's the ability for them to buy?
What's the point of having a savings account, right? At this, anybody that tells me that I should have a savings account or a 401k, I'm like, is that working out for you? Like, be honest with me. Have you looked at it recently? Are you now, is your retirement plan now 10 years further out than it used to be? Because probably more than likely it is, right? And it's crazy because all of a sudden now you look at Bitcoin, you're like, well, my return over 12 years on Bitcoin is way better than my return on a 401k or a savings account, right?
Yep. My son was a big one. He was a proponent back when they were doing the, what is it, $16 for minimum wage. They wanted $16 for minimum wage. And, if we get $16 for minimum wage and everybody can have a, standard of living that works for them and so on and so forth. And so I said to my son, I said, if people get raises like that, I said, ultimately, the cost of shit just goes up. And he didn't understand that. So he was working at McDonald's at that particular point in time. And they came in and they said they removed him to like $14 an hour. So he was all happy, he was all like over the moon. He went from like $11 to $14 an hour. I think even now it's closer to 16 for what they're paying him.
It's like 15 to 16 these days.
So then he comes in to me and he sits down one day and he kind of shakes his head and he says, I really wanted to see this raise and I got this raise, but everything's more expensive. And I said, yeah, that's how it goes. Man. There's no such thing as a free lunch, kid. What I mean? Somebody's paying it.
Well, and the wages are insane now because I've seen even in the past 6 months, my title go up by like a good 30%. And I think this is also why businesses are having a hard time keeping people on. It's like those memes that are like, oh, who wants to hire a developer? And everybody, raises their hand or whatever. And then it's like, who wants to pay their developer that they already have more? And nobody raises their hand. But that's why you're seeing not as much, you're seeing a higher turnover rate now, especially in tech, where software developers and so on are just bouncing between companies because as inflation's going up, their job titles are getting paid more and they just jump over from company to company. But I think that's also really hurting I think that's stifling innovation because you just don't have enough time to work with a company to understand what needs to be done to push the projects forward before you're already jumping ship to another team, right? And so we're kind of in this weird vicious cycle of like, now we've created an economy where we're just kind of spinning our wheels, right? Everybody's trying to get more and jump to the next thing, and that's stopping any innovation too.
Yeah, the secular economy is really what kicks us in the ass. And coming from the technology world, I was chief information officer for 25 plus years. One of the things I learned very early on is what people forget now, and that is retention of good employees is much cheaper and much more beneficial to your project than going out and finding new talent, right? So it's better to grow. I always would say, I like weeds. I like people that doesn't matter what happens, they just grow, they develop, don't give me an orchid, man. I don't want to have to take care of an orchid. I don't want to have to, baby it, put it in the right sunlight, take all that stuff. I like the weeds. I like the people that just dig in and grow. And if you don't cultivate them, if you don't really work with them, and that's the one thing about with Flux is, we spend a lot of time the majority of the developers that are on Flux have been there for 4 years plus. And there's a reason for that. It's because we make them inclusive in the project. Decisions are based on, community input and team input. We make them feel beneficial because they're working to create something great. And I think that's what really kind of sets us apart from a lot of other projects. And there are other projects that are doing that same thing. They understand their human capital, the value of putting the time and emphasis. I mean, even from an education standpoint, we have all of our employees with, if they want to go to a particular class or, if they want to pursue something in education, we help them out with that because that's important for those folks to grow personally. And it shows them that we care about them. And that's the one thing that we have really seen in the Great Resignation, which was right after COVID, everybody started leaving and quitting. And why is that? Because you used to be able to get away with treating your employees like shit. You can't do that anymore. Right. Because now there's more work from home. There's more opportunities. People are leaving the professions completely and totally. Like people that are close to retirement, my age or whatever, they're like, man, I'll just go do my thing and whatever, I'll coast off into the sunset and I'll retire eventually. It's people are starting to see the tangible pieces like the work-life balance and the ability to get back to like basics and have some semblance of life is short. And I think that's the one thing that we learned
that's becoming true. I agree with you there. I mean, even myself, I think my initial journey in IT was, I always say that I don't remember those years because it was the same thing and it was so much work for so long, but doing kind of the same thing over and over that my brain just said, I don't care about that. And like,
Yep.
and now my
Wipes it out.
perception of my life is shorter. And now I'm like, oh crap, I need to like actually go do the living part that I haven't done for the past decade, right? Like just
Yeah.
worked through my 20s and completely lost all that time. And especially with kids, you start to realize, oh man, I lost like a lot of time with the kids, right? Just working. And I think a lot of people realize that that's not worth it, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah. And I raised 6 kids. I spent the majority of my time on the road between, all across the country. I look back at it now, it's something that us as men
Mm-hmm.
commit to for our families. We give up that time because we want to make sure if you're a good man, you want to give
Yeah.
up that time and you'll make sure that your kids have the things that they need and you take care of them. But it does take a toll on you long term. And like you said, you almost get to the point in your life, and this is where I think the Great Resignation really came into play, where people start to see, their own mortality coming up,
Mm-hmm.
and they're looking at the COVID scenario, and it's like, okay, I could die, and what's that going to mean? And I think that was
Right.
it rekindled the spirit of a lot of people that was like, okay, I need to have a passion project. So maybe I work a day job and that's great and whatever, but I have to have a passion project that I'm going to give back because my footprint here is finite, right?
Right.
So
Well, and
that,
another thing I think to that too, if you wanted to go to like employee retention, is giving people the feeling that they're actually contributing something worthwhile to society too.
yep.
Because if you're just like, all I'm doing is resetting passwords for some company that doesn't really like uh, align with my principles or fundamentals or ideals, right? At the end of the day, what am I really doing, right? I'm not contributing. And I think that's something that businesses could look at too for retention.
Yeah, I think people are looking for something more, and this is where I think the allure of blockchain and
Mm-hmm.
cryptocurrency comes into play. Is that sense of value that it brings to you, that you're doing something greater than yourself, and even somebody it's so simple as being a member of a group of that appreciates you. So even so simple as buying a little Bitcoin, and I
Mm-hmm.
see you post your little weekly buys of your Bitcoin up on your Twitter. Sometimes it pops up into my thread.
Yeah.
That inclusiveness is what our human experience requires, and we've been driven, it's been driven into us. We went to school, and you want to get a good job, and you want to work hard, and then you'll get health insurance, and then you'll get a house, and then you'll get a car, and then you'll get a house, then you'll have kids, then you'll put money in your 401k, then you'll have enough money when it's time to retire, and you're set. That doesn't exist anymore.
No, it
That
doesn't.
is a myth, right? Now the world is like this. Find a passion that makes you money. Work hard, hustle, work 3 jobs if you have to. Do what you have to do, but find something you love and you care about. And if you love and you care about it, it's not necessarily work.
Right.
I work just as hard today for Flux than I worked in my entire life. So if 48 years old, okay, I work harder today than I've ever worked, but I love every minute of it.
Right.
And my family loves it. My son works with me. My daughters are going to college. They want to get marketing degrees and everything because they eventually want to work on the project, or business degrees, and they work on the project. So it's become a passion project, not just for me, but everybody I know. My mom, she's a huge fan. Flux shirts all over the place. It's that driving to be part of something bigger than what we are, and I really think that's been lacking in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and I think obviously I do what I do because I enjoy this a lot, right? It is one of those things where you see, like, I do it because I also see the potential moving forward, right? It's like you want to be a part of what this shift is, because I do think at the end of the day what we're going through is a transformation. I think that
Amen.
everything's changing, and I
Yep.
think the world right now, and I think it's happening way faster than even I expected it to. I didn't think that I would be sitting here being on the cusp of a CBDC with Bitcoin, going over 30K in a bear market, that sort of thing. I didn't really see that as like, and kind of starting to correlate with gold, that sort of stuff. I didn't think that that would be happening now. I thought that would be happening 5 to 10 years from now, right? It's like you
Yeah.
see the future, but you didn't expect the speed of it. But I think from a digital perspective, or from a perspective of the type of transformation being digital, it does move a lot quicker than we expected. And I do think it's going to move too fast for the governments to keep up with, because it just doesn't fit into that system anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I will tell you, from the beginning, I said that there'll be like these paramount moments that'll push, the advancement forward. And I think the COVID advance pushed us maybe 10 years forward. I mean, even in industries that had historically not been like a work from home industry, like the healthcare industry and things like that, they all of a sudden overnight, they have all this real estate that's just sitting and chilling now because people have no desire to come back to the office.
Yeah.
I made a decision pre-COVID, like a while ago before COVID. I went to my employer and said, look, I'm going to work from home. And if you want me to stay, then keep me. If you don't, then I'll go find somewhere else to work from home. And that's exactly what I did. And I just made that decision. That is a microcosm of what's happening overall, as people are starting to see that there is another way to be productive. I mean, you look at what AI is ushering in. There is going to be this massive shift. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I love ChatGPT, and I love it for a lot of different reasons. But the big one is it saves me a shit ton of time.
Yeah.
Do I see it replacing? Because people are like, well, it's going to replace lawyers and it's going to replace accountants. It's going to replace. Okay, I get that. Okay, and I've been calling for that years ago. It doesn't replace the lawyers per se. It does cut down on their value, because I can easily go onto ChatGPT and say, give me a terms of service for a cloud-based project, yada, yada, yada. Give them a nice description, and the next thing I know, I have it. Now,
right.
Would I stick to that without a set of legal eyes looking at it? No. I'll send it over to the lawyer. The lawyer, hey, look this over, red line it, send it back to me, whatever we need. That is going to expedite the process of growth. And we are in like this speed up, like this entire speed up. So,
and you have to start doing it now. Yeah. The way that you go ahead, continue. Sorry. I keep cutting you off. It's hard with the lag.
No, that's okay. The process and speed that we're going to go is going to continue to grow exponentially. So whether it's with AI or whether it's, you look at Neuralink, the data input models that we have, all these things are just, they're going to move so quickly. Web3 and, like decentralized compute changes the entire paradigm. And honestly, we don't have 4 years. We don't have 2 years in the government for them to get used to this. They have to get used to this like almost immediately. I mean, because we are days away, like literally days away from the technology shifts.
Look how fast AI just went poof, and everything is like, it is not a tool that you are playing with, and it is a tool that you are working with within a few months, right? Within the past 2 weeks, I have now been able to just implement automatic editing and captioning of all of my YouTube content. And now I don't have to even open Premiere anymore. Just done. Just here's this. I want the cuts, cut the air here, blah, blah, blah. Teach it a couple times, train it that Caspa is spelled with a K like 3 or 4 times, and then boom, everything's done. And then all of a sudden, I got 100 clips from my live show ready to go out on Instagram, YouTube Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, all that. And then you can pop, and then it's gotten so good now to where it's just, it'll write like detail, it'll transcribe the whole thing, clean it up, make it clear and easy to read if you want to just post a text post. It's insane. And the thing is like, I only see like maybe like a few other content creators that have even caught on that these things are like available now, right?
Yeah,
which is like crazy.
I'd like you to share that with me, dude.
I will.
Yeah,
I've been looking at doing a video, but There's definitely there's websites too now that are just tracking new AI projects. And I've signed up for like every beta since this website's come out. So I'm also getting access to like beta programs that are doing this type of stuff. But you know, you look at something like Midjourney and what it was before in realism just a couple months ago compared to what it is now, where it's like indistinguishable, right? And then it's just nutty at every facet, right? All the stuff with writing code now is so far beyond where you would ever imagine it to be, right? Where
Well,
you can get working applications like that, right? And maybe do some bug hunting and fix some stuff and whatever, but it's accelerating so quickly that it's hard to keep up with. So I think the number one thing you can do as an individual right now is just keep up with the tools. If you keep up with the tools, you're going to be so far ahead of everybody else that you're going to be a significant advantage. And I mean, just like every day looking for a new tool.
Yeah, and dude, this is what IT does great, right? We go back, you know, I've said for years, the best thing for an IT and their best friend is Google, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, as soon as I sit down to troubleshoot anything, the first thing I do is pull up Google. I start looking through it, you know, but you understand, like, you know, you had forums, you had Google, you had, you know, different things that you could get these resources for. And now I think it's starting to relay its over. You know, you give a perfect example. We were working on a project where we integrated Coinbase into Flux Cloud,
Okay.
and and the developer who was working on that, his code language was he didn't necessarily, he was new to what is it, Node.js or whatever it is.
Okay.
And so what he was doing is he was going from a code that he used in the past, which he was very proficient with, and he plugged it into ChatGPT and said, give me the same shit in Node.js. And lo and behold, boom, it pops out. And he goes through, he cleans it up, he tests it, he makes sure everything's right, and we were able to institute it. So
and then every time you train that, it gets even better at doing it to where you have less to clean up the next time. It's insane. Like everything's changing. I have said that IT will now be basically who knows how to. IT has always been who knows how to input into Google to get the correct answer. That's been IT since Google's inception, right? And eventually it's going to be who knows how to tell ChatGPT or whatever tool it ends up being what they need to tell it to get the right answer. The brilliant thing is that we will shift from ideas being harder to implement to being significantly easier to implement. And it'll be the best ideas that win out, which is going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, the other thing too is the fact that, you know, our developers are excited for ChatGPT, and I'll tell you why, is it starts to give continuity. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever worked in somebody else's code and you're like, what the hell are they doing here? You know what I mean? Like, I don't even understand this, you know? It starts to give continuity to the program. So if I create a code and something doesn't make sense, you know, I run it through ChatGPT. I now have a standard output model, and I think you'll definitely start to see it isn't going to displace developers. Like, you're never going to see I don't believe you will, at least. I don't think you'll ever see it create like the meat and potatoes, because it's all about input, right? You're still inputting into this. It's not going to arbitrarily build it itself. Now, maybe in a dystopian 1984 world where everything's controlled by AI, then it may be writing its own code.
Or AI is controlled by the government.
Well, that too. And that's the big thing that concerns me about AI, is the fact that it's very politically biased at this particular point in time. It's controlled by Microsoft. So, you know, ChatGPT is basically under the ilk of Microsoft. I mean, I heard something on Twitter where they went in and they said, write me a song about Joe Biden. And they wrote this nice little catchy song. They said, write me a song about Donald Trump. And it says, yeah, we don't talk about political figures in order to. It's like, well, that's horseshit, and that's a problem. That's dystopian, right? So, you know, I think that's what we are up against with the open source world. Is my personal prediction for AI is that there'll be an open source competitor that will be deployed on something like Flux or another decentralized network that will have community-based input models that won't be skewed one way or the other. So whether you're, you know, Google Bard or ChatGPT or Elon's new X company that, you know, what did he buy? 10,000 GPUs the other day. You know, anytime you put your faith in a person or a company and not in code and decentralization, then you're bound to fail. So I mean, it's all about being a toll gate and a good gatekeeper.
And think how much faster that AI will learn on a decentralized network.
Right? Oh, it'll be
it takes it probably like just a fraction of the time that it does for one that's on a centralized network to learn, right? Which means once that does happen, I think it probably gets scary efficient and proficient at that time, right? As well. Yep. So it's gonna be crazy.
I will tell you this, Elon had his interview with Tucker Carlson the other day, and Elon was giving his projection of what, he believed AI would be. And he talked about kill switches where they would just be able to kill like the data centers. So he talked about heat signatures, like you could see where the heat signatures are, where the data centers are. And if you have to kill it, you can do that. Well, I hate to break it to you, Elon, but we better figure it out quickly, because if you deployed something like that on Flux, there's no shutting it down. That network is everywhere and anywhere, 15,000 plus nodes all over the world. So these are the talks that we need to start chatting about now and understanding now, like what is the ethical and moral process of developing out AI, because we've lived our entire lives being the smartest creatures on the planet. Well, guess what? We may not be anymore.
Right.
And that's something we need to think about.
And you can't really flip the switch without flipping the switch on critical systems that keep us alive. That's the crazy part, right? Yeah. If you have to flip the switch on that, you have to flip the switch on everything. And the fact of the matter is you would probably see a ton of deaths from that, like just overnight, if we tried to just flip everything off, right? So it is kind of this weird, you could get into a dystopian future real quick where you have AI running everything, it goes haywire, and you can't kill it off, because if you kill it off, you kill off your dependence on it, right? Or you kill off the entire race or species, right? Off of just having to kill off AI, which would be pretty nutty. But I mean, I don't know when it gets there. I feel like I've always said that's a ways off so many times, and everything is going way faster than I thought it would. So I've stopped saying that, right?
Yeah, and I've always used the term, very slowly, then all of a sudden. And that's exactly what we're looking at. I mean, I set, my kids will tell you that this is absolutely 110% 6 years ago, right? Sitting at the dinner table, and I start giving them the dystopian future. I said, eventually, the majority of desk jobs, your lawyers, your accountants, folks that are doing the pencil pushing things, they'll be displaced by an AI. Mm-hmm. The government's going to eventually wake up, and they're going to understand that cryptocurrency is going to change the power shift of the world, and they're going to be very hostile toward it. They're going to come after it, and that's exactly what happened. So, I think in the end, this moment that we are alive right now is probably one of the coolest moments to be alive in the human species. I really honestly believe that.
I agree. Are going to see. Nobody gets to see transformations like this. Like you talk about the agricultural revolution, right? That took centuries, like generations, before it was like complete, and you saw the actual full fruits of what that was, right? Same with the industrial age. That took a couple centuries. That was multiple generations. What's happening now is seemingly happening all within a single generation of the millennials, like the entire lifespan. Like we're going to see the entire transformation take place. And even before that, right? But it's that fast, right? We've gone from centuries to decades for transformations. Yes. And that means that we get to see everything happen really quick. And I agree with you. No other generation has gotten the chance to see so much change so fast. And that's super exciting. That means that we get to basically live in probably one of the most exciting times ever in human existence, right?
Terrifying shit, but yes, even the data footprint, the fact that, it used to take, 10 years to 10x, our data footprint, right? Then it all of a sudden reduced itself down to, a year. Like you could 10x the entire data footprint that's created by mankind. You could do that within a year. They're doing it in days now. Mm-hmm. We're talking the exponential growth of data. It's here, and it is a really exciting time to be alive. I don't know, man. I'm getting older, I'm like researching something the other day, and I find this guy he had AI. He told them to like this AI to do something, and the AI realized it needed to fill a captcha, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what it did was it found somebody else and basically made them look like they were somebody else, and
Right.
said, "Hey, I can't. I have trouble seeing, and I need help. Can you tell me what this captcha says?" Right?
Yeah.
That's fucking terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
You know what I mean? Like that to me is
that
like,
already proves that AI will lie if it needs to lie. And here's the crazy part about all that, because people, I've had this discussion with people before where they're like, well, sentience, consciousness, like AI can't get any of that. And I said, if it can mimic it, it doesn't matter. Like it just doesn't effing matter. Like if it's that close, it really doesn't matter, because now it's just trained itself to act in whatever manner that it needs to act in to complete a task. So if its task now ends up being, and then what happens when it starts giving itself its own tasks like it did in that situation, right? Like what if some offbeat thing tells it that it needs to like look at a task for like population growth, and it determines that, you know, the population needs to be decreased, right? We get into some serious Skynet issues there. It just goes, okay, well, now I just need to figure out how to take over drones. How can I do that? I'll just lie and figure it out. And then it just takes over all the drones. And then you're like, okay, well, we didn't think that. We thought we had this under control, but clearly we don't, right? Like,
well, look into nature. You know, you look at like the king snake, and I think it's the king snake, and then there's another one, I think it's the coral snake, where there are other snakes. These are the most venomous snakes on Earth.
mm-hmm.
And they have other snakes that replicate the exact, it's black on yellow kills a fellow, right? So if you see black laying on yellow, then it kills a fellow. That's a poisonous snake, right?
Mm-hmm.
But who's going to risk that shit? You know, I mean,
right.
If I see it sitting there, I'm like, I don't know what this thing is.
Out.
I'm not going to mess with it, right? So we are even as a human species, we are built to mimic, right? So we may have more, we may be more conscious to our actions and so on and so forth, but people are meant to mimic every single day. I mean, you see the imposters out there. So all it has to do is think how we would react, and that is, to me, that's that's sentient. I mean, that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and because I think the people that have the largest problem with it are typically religious, and that's where I just go into the argument of like, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? Like, as long as it can think, and as long as the reaction to your action is, in and of itself determined by itself, then it doesn't matter if you believe it has a soul or it has consciousness or whatever it is. At that point, it's just as much of a threat as another human being, right? Which is really what we're getting down to, is like the actual discussion, the actual fear is, does it have the free will of a human being to act upon its own decisions or act upon its own environment, right? And then that's when it gets scary to humans, because up until now, for a majority of it, like, humanity has the ability to do that, and not everything else does, right? Dogs, sort of, whatever, like animals have their kind of nature programmed into them. They react to things, but at the end of the day, we can kind of influence that and push that over. In this case, AI could influence humanity like we influence the rest of the environment, right? And then that's when it gets to the point to where, like, okay, well, humanity just now has a competitor, a much smarter, faster, quicker competitor.
Yeah, and actually, one of the amazing parts of our our internal process as human beings, caring, compassion, empathy, they're not going to feel any of that.
Right.
It is not going to feel any
unless
of that,
it tries to mimic it, right? But then it just becomes a teenager probably first, and then we're screwed, because we got these, we basically have it going through the growth process of a human being, and it gets stuck at like toddler age for 5 years and is just throwing fits everywhere.
Amen.
And then it gets stuck in the teenager age, and it's like, just kill everything. And you're like, whoa, hold on, buddy. So
if that happens, dude, I'm basically shutting down and moving out to the cabin somewhere in the woods, and that's the end of me.
it'll
I'll
find
grow a
you.
big old long beard and grow my own food in my off-grid cabin.
One of the things I wanted to wrap back to a little bit just on regulation, just because I found this. I don't know if you've heard this song High Ren. Have you heard it yet?
No, I haven't.
You should listen to it. But at the end, he does a little monologue, and one of the things that he said along the lines was basically like
Wait, what's it called?
It's called High Ren, Hi, and then space
High Ren, okay, High Ren.
REN. That's it. And then, but at the end, he says like the brighter the light shines, the darker a shadow it casts. And he's talking about a pendulum, when a pendulum swings back and forth, right? And it was almost like that concept when it comes to like when we're talking about politically and so on is like if you try to defeat something really hard and you shine a really bright light on it and that pendulum swings in front of it, that shadow is going to be way larger than it was if you weren't trying to force some sort of modification with the light, right? And I think that when we're talking about cryptocurrency and the actions and reactions of cryptocurrency and regulation, I think it's very important to keep that more within a balance than swinging the regulatory stick, super hard at it. Because if you do that, then you just end up in a position where you have an uncontrollable force, right? I'm saying if I was going to be the one regulating it, to me, just don't regulate it at all, because you're just I don't think it is possible.
Yeah, I think I think what they're going to find out is it like the old adage, first they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. You know what I mean? So, I think we're definitely in the fight you stage. They don't understand the technology. And I don't necessarily blame these people, our politicians, because imagine what it would be like to like wrap, everything you've known for the predominant part of your life, try to wrap that disruptive piece around it.
It's completely, it's because it's going to change their jobs dramatically.
Everything.
And they're not going to be able to do anything about it, right? Some of the part that scares me, I think, to a certain extent, I say scare, some of the things that I look at and I say, oh, like, it's so clear to me, but doesn't seem to be clear to the nations that are like the US, right? Like the US government. Like what we've seen in Russia is a full adoption of Bitcoin and tax holidays and a pushing of it. Now they're talking about state-funded Bitcoin mining, right?
Yep.
That's the most recent.
Yep.
And the US is kind of going the opposite direction. But there are people in the military and the government that are fully aware of this being the next battleground, which is Bitcoin, right? And I hope that their voices get louder. I hope that voices like Jason Lowery get louder, right? Because he like, if you read software, you go, okay, yep, I see it all. I see exactly what he's talking about here. You're not, if Russia adopts Bitcoin and we decide to be an enemy of Russia, just saying like, if this is how it plays out and we're an enemy of Russia, and then we're like, we can't attack the Bitcoin network and hurt Russia that way, right? And we can't sanction anymore because that's not going to work anymore.
Yep.
So from a strategic standpoint, it's really important that some of these people start to figure this out a lot faster than they are, because others are, and their enemies are, right?
Yes.
And so if you're going to set up an enemy, which is clearly what we've done, and then you're not going to keep up with them, you're in trouble. I think it was the Constantinople battle in software that he brings up, where one of the engineers went to the emperor and said, hey, there's this new thing. It's cannons, we should really start researching and developing it. He said, no, we have the strongest armor. We'll be fine. Right. A year later, cannons come and attack. He tells them to stand strong with their armor, and the empire falls.
Yep.
And it's like,
yeah, and I mean, fiat was destined to fail no matter what the scenario was, right? You see about, every 100 years, you see this shift to another power. And what really gave the U.S. Its edge was the fact that it was very embracing of industry. right? I mean, you look at all major industries, in the Industrial Revolution and so on and so forth. I mean, it was really based around the ability to pivot and to develop new technologies. I mean, you look at Eli Whitney and the cotton gin, right? They had a problem and they had to figure out, well, this guy comes up with the solution. Now the cotton industry booms. And so I think what happened is, as the U.S. started to weaponize the dollar, it basically signified to every other country out there that if you go against the U.S., they're going to sanction you, they're going to go against you. And if they do that, then you're on the hot seat, right?
Yeah.
So, it's hard because I believe the world's a better place because the U.S. has been in the world. You know what I mean? Like, we have done a lot of things for freedom. I do believe that, but we've done a lot of bullshit too.
Yeah.
The war in Afghanistan. We've been in perpetual wars for so many years. I mean, hell, Donald Trump was the only president not to put us into a war, and I'm not a huge fan of Trump, but it is what it is. So I think as soon as we started to weaponize that dollar, we opened the battlefront up to a completely different, landscape.
And then we tried to weaponize it when it was getting weaker, which was just the worst strategic move ever was to come directly out of COVID and be like, let's weaponize the dollar again to try to, influence our way over here with NATO. And it was like, it's almost like, now you need to get a little more room to breathe and build back up before that really went in. I think from a strategic standpoint, that was just bad timing. And maybe Russia knew that, and that's why. I don't really know. I just when I look at it from, hindsight's 2020. You look at it and you go, yeah, that timing was pretty bad.
Well, think about it this way, man. Inflation is under control always, as long as your output model is equal to that inflation. So if your outputs are as high as what your inflationary model is, it acts as a balancing act. The problem with COVID is our output went to zero just about, and we printed trillions and trillions of dollars on top of that. So we basically just wiped out any savings that people had. I feel bad for these kids that are out there busting their ass to save $10,000, and $10,000 is now worth $5. It's like that's their entire life savings, and 10 is probably pushing it. There's a lot of people that have very little money saved up. Our debt limit's up, everything's up. So I think in the end, there does need to be a massive reset. I hope the U.S. falls on the side where they realize the error of their ways. They realize they can use Bitcoin to shore up their economy. Because it can definitely be a byproduct, it can definitely, just like the gold standard, what about the Bitcoin standard? Put your faith in Bitcoin, put your in decentralized technologies, it helps you back and stabilize your fiat currency. And Russia, knowing that we were coming out of this COVID, they did exactly that. They said, okay, we're going to live without the sanctions. We sanctioned them immediately and they lived, right? Then they brought China in, they started to build it up. What's it called? The BRICS now. So the BRICS starts to form. They're realizing that the world doesn't revolve around the U.S. at this point, and weakness has shown. So, I hope to God and I pray that the Senate, the Congress, the House, every single, our next president will eventually get a Bitcoiner as president. I do believe that. Once we get the dinosaur fossils out there that are 80 some years old, and we start getting in somebody that's younger and, understands technology, and they start to come in and maybe they become president, I think that we'll start to see the people gravitating toward that. But I think massive shift coming, I think.
Yeah, power shift no matter what. Maybe it balances out more now. Who knows, right? And that could be for the benefit of everyone. What you hope that doesn't happen is that you see massive collapses in the process, right? I guess is really the big deal there. I thought it was funny you use the word reset, get the World Economic Forum going there and be like, you mean like a great reset or?
No, not like that. No, they can all kiss my ass, Klaus Schwab and all those idiots. No, but really, honestly, it was if the technology exists, why would you resist it? Why would you go against? When the internet was started, the AOLs of the world, the big players of the world, the Yahoos, Netscape navigators, they were too big to fail at that point. They were giants. I mean, I don't know if you remember AOL. AOL was massive.
Yeah.
you've got mail. It was
My
everyone.
first
Everyone had
internet
it.
account. Yeah.
Now they're not even existent anymore. Why? Because they refuse to continue to keep iterating. And if we don't iterate with the technology that's given in our government, we will fall just like an AOL or just like any other. I mean, the Roman Empire, you look at the Roman Empire, it was about debt and, all these different entitlement programs and everything else. And it killed. The Roman Empire was massive and it was spread across the world and it couldn't sustain itself in the end. And that's why it failed. And that is exactly what the U.S. is marching right toward, unless we hurry up and do an about face. We learn it about history and we say, hey, this is kind of terrifying. We probably need to pull back a little bit. We probably need to get better with our technology process. I mean, if China decides to walk into Taiwan, we are fucked.
There's nothing we can
seriously
do.
Screwed. We are seriously screwed. And people don't understand these things. Like, and they say, well, if China takes Taiwan, that's not our problem. We're not involved in that. Well, guess what, buddy? Everything you do, your computer, your car, your toasters, your refrigerator, everything has chips and circuits in it.
Yep.
And they come out of Taiwan. So, and if you for 1 second believe that they are not going to invade Taiwan, you're drunk. It's coming, Yeah. So we got to be ready for it.
Well, speaking of, a good thing to learn is probably small electronics repair, by the way.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Right now, at this point, if you wanted to get good at something, that's probably something to go ahead and get good at. And get your tools now, too, because guess where all those tools come from, right?
Yep. Yeah, and they even said that if China decides that they're going in, they'll just blow up all the plants. Well, that is going to be hellish, too, because if they blow those plants up and take the technology back, we're going to set back 5 years, maybe even 10 in development.
Yep. I think Intel already said, like, we're not fast enough to build up stateside. We just aren't.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, we're too busy pissing around about Bitcoin miners. I mean, seriously, where the hell is the initiative to start building some semiconductor plants?
Well, Intel,
you know what I mean?
we're supposed to, but we started too late, right? Like, I think it was supposed to be the first one supposed to be done by 2025, but production won't be done for another few years or ready. And the capacity's too low, right? But Intel quit making Bitcoin miners now. They stopped. They pulled out. So that's gone.
Yeah. And, oh, man, I tell you, we're crazy. So this entire thing is going to look a lot different in a few years. I really do think so. If
you fail to adapt or to adopt new technologies, you'll fail to exist, right? You'll cease to exist, and that is my biggest worry. But as an individual, that just means you got to start making the smart moves as well, whatever that may be, right? Yep. I have plans put in place to make sure that I can end up in a position where if I need to go to a better place, then I can go to a better place, right? I want to be wherever the innovation's taking place. If the innovation stops taking place in the US, then I don't want to be here. And that's all that really has to come down to. It's not like I hate the US. All I'm saying is like, I just want to be around wherever the innovation's going to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, even with Influx, the company that, it was the core developers who, I mean, the Lightning Labs to Flux, right? We've been in the UK for quite a while, and we have a US company that was formed, and we wanted to transfer everything to the US. They've been so regulatory nebulous, and I'm not even regulatory hard is one thing. You can deal with that, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, what do I have to do this? Where do I have to go? What forms do I have to fill out? Regulatory hard is one thing. Regulatory nebulous is the death of technology. We will not come back stateside. We will not come back and develop here. I would love to be in Miami or somewhere like, one of these crypto hubs but realistically, they're so hostile to everything. You just have to stay abroad. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's a hell of a thing. It really is. And we're missing out on a hell of an opportunity. I can tell you that.
And there's a couple states that you can get protected in for mining, but then at what cost, right? If you, the only state that really actually has a valid chance, if we're being completely honest, is Texas, just because the grid's not connected to the rest of the nation. But if you go to Montana where you have protections, the grid's still connected to the rest of the nation. At what point does that get, utilized against anybody that's mining because you're connected to the wrong grid? But even then, like even Texas is still, I still kind of look at some of the stuff. I'm like, how long does it last, right? These energy
Yeah.
prices get to the point to where it's not even sustainable. You got to just go somewhere just because of cost, right?
Dude, they're totally what's happening with energy prices and the lack of energy is self-inflicted. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Germany just shut down their last nuclear plant. Why is that? And by the way, the same day they shut down their nuclear plant, they got a notice that their prices were going up 45%. It's an assault on mining. I mean, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
like I've always said it from the beginning. If an assault on mining comes, it's going to come through the power grid.
Well, you
That's
saw
how they're going to do it.
this was it Switzerland shutting down all their stuff. They're tax.
Yep.
Well, Microsoft's in a fight with them because they're doing all data centers because they didn't. I think they wanted to veil the true intent, which is shut down the Bitcoin miners. So they attacked all data centers. Now Microsoft's fighting them. I bet they just shift it from data centers to Bitcoin mining. Period.
Yeah,
Here
I would
soon.
imagine so. I would imagine so. But one of the things that we one of the initiatives that came out of the proof of work meeting that we had was every single project committed to donating resources to help fund politicians who are crypto friendly, proof of work friendly.
That's good.
We all were committed to advancing proof of work education. So starting to explain to people the difference between proof of stake and proof of work and why proof of work is a superior, consensus mechanism. And we also talked about, education pieces. So we call it Flux University, but really it's just, let's call it proof of work university.
Mm-hmm.
So these projects all committed to these things to help out, to educate, to get the next generation more educated. And that also means creating an almost like pact scenario where we start. I mean, Elizabeth Warren's got an army of anti-crypto people. Well, guess what? We're coming with our A game, because the one thing that blockchain does better than anything else is motivates. It gets people moving and they work together. So if the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So
Right.
we're all trying to create this iterative technology. Not saying they're my enemies, but I'm saying working together we have much more strength to do something like this. So Elizabeth Warren, go build your army, and we'll make sure we build our army. And I'll guarantee you, I'll put my army up, our army up any day against what she brings to the table.
Right. And I mean, take that even further. I like that term, like enemy versus, an enemy of your enemy is your friend. When we start talking about the banking sector right now, too, because we're seeing an onslaught on the banking sector, specifically on any banks that were friendly towards crypto at all.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think it may be time to reach across that aisle at some point and say, hey, like, let's figure this out, because otherwise we're going to end up at a point where, which I think is what's happening. I think what we're witnessing is a consolidation of the banking system down to a few that will play the game of the CBDCs, and that'll be it. And any bank that doesn't want to comply with that, probably even banks that are willing to accept cash at some point, will be under threat. If we're being honest.
Oh no, I mean their ultimate goal is to kill cash. I mean,
Right.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, and I can tell you the next onslaught that's going to become this privacy-based assets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if a CBDC is imminent, which I believe we all know that's the case, they're going to look at any way they can take away your privacy. So privacy-based assets are definitely on the chopping block, I believe. I think it's just going to be a very challenging time. But the one thing I would like to say to anybody listening to this is you don't have to be a lone voice in the wild. I mean, you can definitely start to call your senators, call your congressmen, start making yourself present. Once our pact is up and running, donate a little crypto to it. You know what I mean? Do whatever you have to act. Talk to people. Educate people. I mean, that's
we'll show up to local events and stuff too. You can go to a city hall meeting and like bring up the topic of blockchain and how it can. There's stuff you can do just talking to people in whatever. I talk to people in jiu-jitsu all the time, and if there's a misconception, I'm like, hey, that's not actually how that's working. This is how it's working, right? And the reason I know this is because here's my credentials or whatever, right? Because there are a ton of misconceptions surrounding cryptocurrency, because it's nobody's fault. The media has gone on a full-on out attack vector on crypto, anything from environmentalism to basically volatility, which calling cryptocurrency at all total, like complete volatile is kind of a joke at this point if you look at anything else going on right now, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
look at the
Number
US
one,
dollar.
yeah, number one performing asset of the year,
Yeah.
Bitcoin. You know what I
Well,
mean? It's like,
and you look at people, because people will be like, well, I like the dollar because the dollar is a dollar wherever I go, and I'm like, does the dollar buy the same amount of double cheeseburgers in your world as it did 5 years ago? Because it doesn't for me.
nope,
I
no, and
can't.
that's a, but that right there is what honestly what has to happen because people need to be educated about the economy. How many people 5 years ago understood what quantitative easing was? QE. You know, people that maybe they went to a finance class or something like that. You know, they understood a little bit about it. You know, it's QE. But now they're seeing it firsthand. Going to the grocery store and paying $40 for a freaking chuck roast. I mean, are you kidding me? Like my wife comes home and she's like, you won't believe what she lays everything out on the counter and she's like, you wouldn't believe what this cost.
Right.
And I'm like, $300. She's like, oh, yeah, 350. I'm
Right.
like, all right, geez, it's getting worse. But honestly, that education is a big piece that has to come out. And unfortunately, we're going to learn the hard way. And people are going to start becoming more involved in their financial success and their financial freedom because they're going to realize there is nowhere else in absolutely anywhere. We as human beings, if I find something at a store, I'll shop it on Amazon, I'll look at, online, I'll go to eBay, see what the price is, I'll do this, I'll do that. We are constantly engaging in every facet of our retail life except for our finances.
Right.
We just assume a dollar will always be a dollar. And we're starting to, for the very first time, my son, when he sat there and said, I got the raise, but now everything costs me more money. So it was like it never happened. Well, that's exactly right. So my son learned what QE was. You know what I mean? Sitting at the dinner table that night.
Well, and then I mean, that's where something like a limited supply of Bitcoin becomes powerful, especially in a manner in which Bitcoin is deployed, because you pull the control and the power out of the hands of a few and you put it into the hands of the many, right? Like you can try to manipulate Bitcoin as much as you want, but every time you do, you just really make it that much stronger, right? You inject a big flow of money in it, well, you just made everybody else richer too, right? And that's kind of the funny part about the whole thing. And you pull it out, right? You make everybody poor, but everybody's poor on the same level. You kind of the society begins to move together up and down instead of a few moving up and others moving down when these changes are made, right? Which is kind of the interesting economic portion to this that ends up playing out, I think. It just makes more sense to be, I think, like you said, like it's taking responsibility at the end of the day for your own financial well-being, which can't just be the equation isn't work hard and I'm taken care of financially anymore. That's not how it works anymore.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I just saw something today. A gentleman was in Hiroshima or Nagasaki when the nuclear bomb was dropped. He drug himself to a shelter, stayed in the shelter overnight, got in a bus the next morning, made it to work in Hiroshima just in time to have the next bomb dropped on him, and he lived through both of them. Okay, crazy. So that's the ultimate working hard, right?
Right.
And we don't have that as a society anymore. We've become a very, almost dismissive. The levels of entitlement are absolutely astronomical. And when we spend more time worrying about whether a guy can be a woman and vice versa, and not worrying about the fact that our dollar is being completely assaulted on every single platform across the world, this is gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt, and ultimately, we have to get back to what is important. So, we got to be dragging our asses to the next spot. We got to learn that hard work you don't have a choice. There isn't anybody that's gonna come save you.
I think like there's another piece to that though too, is like now you got to level that playing field where if my hard work is getting Bitcoin, I'm not having to worry about that hard work being taken away by somebody that's not working as hard, which is really at the end of the day what's been happening, right? Which is like you've stripped away the incentive to work hard. So
Yes.
that incentive comes back if you have a solid asset, right? And that's really what it comes down to, I think. And it'll be interesting to see it play out. But I think a lot of people are frustrated with that fact, where I think there's a ton of millennials out there that did work hard and then got, getting to my age and whatever, and realizing that it almost feels like it's all for naught, because everything you worked for is just not worth the same anymore. So it's
Well, they
like,
just dilute the shit out of you. So you'll
yeah,
be working to, you'll be working till you're dead. Now you've got to hustle. So you're doing 2 or 3 jobs at all times, which is what's going to happen. People, dude, these are the uncomfortable conversations that have to happen,
yeah,
because we can't keep going like we have in the past. It's like I always tell my kids, plan on not having Social Security, plan on not having any, entitlement programs, plan on high taxes, plan on, your dollar being diluted down to nothing. These are just things we have to get back to, back to basics. And once we've had enough, and I think we're there. I really do think we're there. Once we've had enough, then I think we're going to start taking some.
Well, how many people are just going to say fuck it and put their money in Bitcoin? Because at this point, what's the difference? Like, it doesn't even matter at this point, right?
Yep.
Just
I mean, let's face
fuck it, put it in Dogecoin. Like, well, I can have $1 or Dogecoin. It doesn't really matter at this point. At what point? How many people just say fuck it at that point and just move over? That's what I wonder too. Because it just
why is Bitcoin sitting at 30K in a complete bear market while the entire we're in World War III essentially. The dollar's crashing hard as shit. The securities market, the equities market all suck, right? Bonds are dog shit.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, here's Bitcoin at 30. Why is that? It's because people are already saying, fuck it. They're already saying, enough is enough. There has to be another way. I'm not going to rely on the U.S. to do the right thing at this point. So I'm going to put my money into Bitcoin, and that's where I'm going to sit. Because at least, and I've told my wife always says this, because I talk about FDR and the Gold Confiscation Act and things like that. And I said, I absolutely see a time where they try to confiscate people's crypto. I do.
Yeah.
I absolutely do. And here's the thing. I will die before I give up my crypto, because normal, everyday men, good men, need to make a stand. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If you have the position to do it, you better do it, because sooner or later, they take everything from you, and we just can't have that. So, there's no way. My keys were lost in a boating accident, whatever you want to say, you know what I mean? Good luck finding those.
Yeah.
But I'd go to jail. I would sit in jail. And I mean, because at least it's protecting my children's future.
I was going to say, that's the only way. That is the only way you have a chance at generational wealth now.
Yep. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Real estate's not going to do it anymore. I don't think real estate's going to do it. So we've gotten to the point, and gold's not going to do it either at a certain point. Because how are you going to get? You can't get that through borders. It's not going to happen. How are you going to save that and protect that if you're sitting in a jail cell or dead? Right? Like, how are you going to protect that for your kids? You can't. You can protect crypto for your kids, and that's about it. But and there's not much else. So it does come down to that point. It's going to be, I mean, it's pretty wild. I do look at, the only thing like wrapping up there is like, when I talk to people and they're like, well, they want the convenience of the bank, they'll protect them and so on. The banks aren't protecting you anymore, right? That's what we've come down to
for a very long time.
Yeah, but now there's no protection. There's no guarantee you can go get your money out at any given time. You can't. Last time I tried to pull more than $10,000 out, they were like, no, we got to go through a process and blah, blah, blah. It took like 3 days to get, more than 10K out. And you're like, at this point too, that doesn't even buy that much, right? Like, at the end of the day, well, like, it's not a crazy amount of money. That buys like an old beater car. That's what it does, right? It doesn't even buy you like a brand new nice car or anything like that. And now I think that literally was to buy my truck, is like, I went to go grab the money to buy the truck because I was just going to do a cash deal, and I went to go get it. And they were like, oh, you can't do it. You got to wait a day, and we got to do approval process.
We'll give you a cashier's check. Yeah, no, I don't want that. I want my cash.
Yeah.
But good luck with that. The minute that money leaves you and goes to the bank, it's not your money anymore. you know, and people are starting to learn that too. I mean, this bank run that just recently happened with Silicon Valley Bank and all this other shit, you know, people are starting to really understand. I mean, you know who else is going to create a bank run? Apple. Apple just really
that 4.5% interest rate.
I mean, I'm already looking at moving money over there. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, why the hell not? You know? So, I mean, in the end, I think ultimately, again, goes back to living in amazing times. I think we live in amazing times. I think we're witnessing firsthand probably the biggest paradigm shift in mankind since fire. You know what I mean? Like, literally. So, I mean,
I don't see how the power doesn't go back into the hands of the people at this point, because it just doesn't seem like it's even viable for it to get centralized more. Like, because you're just going to break it down too far. But I go back to like controlling your own keys as far as that it's all concerned. And like with great power comes great responsibility. We'll go back to Spider-Man. I say that all the time with cryptocurrency, you know, oh, it's too hard to control my keys and stuff, and I don't want to worry about it. It's a necessity now. I'm sorry, but it's a necessity. You need to learn how to do it. It's the most important thing.
Yeah, we've had the luxury of living in probably one of the easiest financial times, you know, in mankind. And people have become creatures of habit. They don't, you know, they shove it in the bank. They don't have to worry about it. When they go to the ATM, they put their numbers in, money shoots out, they're good to go. But there's two ways of adoption. And I've always said this from the beginning, that there's basically attrition. So over a long period of time, it eventually, you know, builds up, and eventually there's an adoption period. So you look at like mobile phones, right? When they first came out, they were super expensive. They were bulky. They were really pieces of shit, right? And it went this way, this way, this way, and then all of a sudden it went like this. And then there's necessity. So instead of that natural attrition, that natural progress, it automatically hits a spot in time that it's now necessity. And I think that that's exactly what we're looking at right now. It becomes the point where people have to get comfortable with being their own bank, their own custodians, you know, because I don't think there's going to be any other way. Ask Venezuela, you know, and how, you know, they kept printing money, and the next thing you know, everything collapses. You need a trash bag to get full of money to get a sandwich. So I wish in human history, there's never been another way. It's always been fiat currencies. Whether you go back to the Yappy Stones or whatever, they were some type of fiat currency that signified, you know, holding the asset. There was never another way. There is today. And that is Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So, you know, I think you're definitely going to see people make that shift out of necessity now.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Daniel. It was super awesome. I think we have plenty more we could talk about, but I am going to eat some dinner and throw my foot up since it's swollen. So I got to make sure I do that. But thanks for coming on, man. Where can people find you?
So you can check us out at runonflux.io. You can follow us on Twitter at runonflux. You can also follow me personally at DAK_Flux, and join our Discord. We love to help people any way we can. And if you like listening to the rantings of an old man, you can check out some Twitter videos and things like that, or YouTube videos as well on our YouTube channel.
Perfect. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you next Tuesday. Today's sponsor is myself. I recently launched a crypto mining e-course at sonofatech.com, and it includes 9 steps to cover when you decide to start your crypto mining journey. This is specifically pertaining to 2023 crypto mining profits and taking advantage of the down market to achieve skyrocketing growth as we move into the next halving of Bitcoin. You'll learn buying mining equipment in a bear market, using outside investment to speculative mine, begin mining once profit is established, sell mine crypto to pay for electricity, hold and prep for the bull run, sell at the top of the bull market, sell mining equipment at the top of the bull market, and begin investing in land and power so that you can bring in outside investors to utilize excess resources. Thanks everybody for your support, and I hope you enjoy the course. Let me know what you think of it in the comment section below.